Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. This is the Strengthen Your Human Cybershield, How to Engage Your Employees webinar. All participants will be placed on mute during the presentations, but during the Q&A session, feel free to unmute yourself to ask questions. You can also submit them through the question function in your webinar panel. This webinar is being recorded. The recording and slide deck will be sent out within a few days. There will be a survey that appears on your screen at the end of the webinar. Your feedback is very important to us, and we want to provide you with as much value as possible through these webinars. If you would take a few minutes to fill that out, we would greatly appreciate it. For those of you who may not be familiar with Richie May, we were founded almost 40 years ago to focus exclusively on the needs of the mortgage banking industry. This singular focus from our experts enables us to help lenders accomplish their goals. Our experts believe in the forward progress and success of the industry and dedicate much of their time to teaching through webinars like this and building others through the MBA School of Mortgage Banking and at other industry conferences and associations. And now I will turn it over to today's presenter, Chris Williams.
Hello, everybody. I'm glad to be talking to all of you about cybersecurity, something I'm very passionate about. And I want to make sure that when we're going through this, the biggest key takeaways for everybody should be, why does this matter to me? So let's think about that as we're going forward. I want to tell you guys a quick story. So about a year ago, this is my dog. She got lost. She got out. One of my kids left the gate open. She got out and she was gone for about 3 days. Like a good father, good pet owner. I put my phone number out there on Craigslist, all the different social media apps. I'm looking all over the place for my dog. We drove around. She is microchipped, but we couldn't find her. It was one of those things where nobody was reporting her. We didn't see her. She's going deaf. She's blind. She's an old dog. She's about 15 years old. She's been a part of the family for a very long time. And so obviously we were very stressed out. We were afraid that we lost our dog for good. About day 3, I started getting text messages. Hey, I found your dog. It's like, oh, they found my dog. That's amazing. My kids were really excited because they were sitting, was at the breakfast table. I was like, hey, somebody found our dog. And then it followed up with, hey, I need to verify that you are actually who you are. Send me your Google code. And because I am who I am, I knew immediately that I was being scammed. But it's those kind of things that the scammers are going after. And why are they going after that? We'll talk about that as we continue on through this webinar. So today, one of the things that I want to make sure that we're focusing on is understanding the risk. Why are we at risk? Why are our employees at risk? Why are our friends and family at risk? What can we do to understand this? And then what can we do to change? Is it our behaviors that need to change? Is it the controls that we have in place? How can we make sure that the bad guys don't win? They're always changing up their tactics, so we have to understand what we need to do to be better. And then what can we do as far as training and ourselves, our employees, our coworkers, our friends, to help them understand it. And then at the very end of this, we're going to make sure that we have time for questions. So if anybody has those, you can put those in the chat and those will be delivered to me at the end. And I'm more than happy to talk about any questions that you have that come up while we're talking about cybersecurity this week. So why are we still at risk? There's all these different things that we have in place that theoretically should help eliminate some of the risk. Now, some of us are further along than others in our organization. Some of us understand cybersecurity a little bit better, or just ways to keep ourselves secure. One of the things that I see and I talk to a lot when I'm talking to different IT professionals, different security professionals, is, hey, they shouldn't be doing this. We have policies in place for this. We've developed all this. I do a lot of physical penetration testing with Richie May. We also do a lot of clean desk walkthroughs and social engineering. What we find is that either the policy isn't good enough or the training that goes along with that policy, and this is the key, isn't good enough. One of my favorite social engineers says that humans aren't the weakest link, humans are the least invested link. And so looking at it as this mindset of, we can put all of these different controls in place, we can tell them, we can reprimand them, but there's a level where it doesn't sink in. Think about when you got onboarded with whatever company you're at. Did you look at all of the policies you signed? Most people don't. I do because I'm a big nerd. But most people, when they get those policies and they have that document that they need to sign, they're real quick to sign it because they're really excited about having a new job. They are hopefully really excited to be starting somewhere new. And so it's one of those things where, yeah, we had them sign it once a year and they've all signed off on it. So they know they shouldn't leave, sensitive data on a printer. It shouldn't happen. But almost every time I've gone through and done a clean desk, I find, sensitive documents either on or near the printer, in the shred bin or next to the shred bins, in drawers. It's one of those things where it's going to get out. One of the things that we also need to understand is that bad guys do not care how many times they fail. I like to say it as bad guys do not have a batting average. If they strike out 100 times, but then they get somebody one time after that, they still struck out 100 times, but they don't care. They only need that one person to make a mistake. They need one entry to get into your systems. What we're seeing is that um, it's down to less than 24 hours now after a bad guy has gotten into the system to actually start compromising your systems. So when we're seeing that this gap that we have in security, it's not always necessarily going to be evident immediately. And almost always for the United States, what we're seeing is that we have a large uptick in holidays or weekends. So they're not taking place at 2 in the afternoon when your security team's sitting there or your IT team sitting there. They're really relying on some downtime for you to not be paying full attention, to be able to get in and start really wreaking havoc on your infrastructure. The other stat that we're seeing is it takes about 98% of all cybersecurity attacks start with social engineering. I have a picture here of Las Vegas. I'm not sure. Most everybody at this point in time should have heard about the two casinos that got compromised. They had MFA, they had all kinds of technical controls, all of the things that we sit here in different webinars and cybersecurity talks, and we're like, hey, you need to have these things in place. Well, they were able to get through from a 10-minute phone call on a social engineering phone call and get the data that they needed to do to lock down these casinos. I believe the last time I heard that Caesars paid $15 million. They asked for 30, and then MGM is still trying to recover from the amount of time that they were down. Now, obviously, or I'm assuming most everybody here isn't in a casino, but you do have this potential vulnerability. You have things that bad guys are wanting to get. They're looking for that PII. They're looking for the data that you have that helps you run your business. Now, think about the information that you have and what value would be to these bad guys. Most of these bad guys are just trying to figure out ways to make more money. There's tons of money to be made in every industry across the board. So going after a casino may not be typical for you guys, but what we see is they're going after financial industries, they're going after education, they're going after healthcare. They don't really care what industry they're going after, and that's pretty common with their tactics that they're using on all of these various industries. They're first getting in there by sending a phishing link, a spear phishing link, so they have the data that they've collected, and they're able to start getting people to do things that they normally wouldn't do. Now, why are they doing that? One of the things that we look at is people naturally just want to help, right? We prey on that as the good guys pretending to be bad guys because the bad guys are preying on that. They have this idea of, well, we want to provide good customer service. I've done a lot of different things where people are just like, oh well, they were just trying to be nice. They were trying to help provide good service. Well, my key takeaway for you guys for this section of it is really understand that if we're not providing customer service to our actual customers, we're not providing good customer service. So as soon as we start giving out data to somebody that pretends to be our customers, then we start really getting into some bad habits, bad issues. We have start having to figure out, well, what can we do to recover from this really damaging leak of information that shouldn't have gotten out in the first place? Now, it's one of those things where as we're looking at it, it's like, oh wow, you have all of these different things that we are now seeing and we're doing awful, but how can we fix it? Um, One of the things that I like to say is I am not a documentary video. I don't want to bring up a bunch of points that you guys are like, yeah, I know that. I'm Michael Moore. It's like we shouldn't eat McDonald's. It's one of those things where what can we do to make this better, right? Well, really what we need to figure out is, why does this matter to me? Now, if anybody out there, and I don't know who all's out there, if you're an IT director, or if you have to deal with the technology stack like I do, then you're like, oh, well, it should matter to you because it matters to me. The reality is that nobody across the board is going to care about corporate data as much as you think they should. And maybe somebody's like, oh yeah, I should do this to be protective, whatever it happens to be. Eventually, if people are like myself and a lot of people, I mean, we schedule this over most people's lunch because you have time to sit here and listen to me, is that when you get busy, the little things don't matter as much to you, especially the ones that cause you more work. A lot of the security controls that we put in place cause a lot of headache to you, right? I mean, nobody honestly is wanting to go and like punch in a 8-digit code after they put in their password that they've gotten from their phone. They can't find their phone. How do I get my authenticator app to work? It's all a big hassle. And when we're in a hurry, when we got things that we have to get done and we're on a deadline, it doesn't really matter. So why would it matter to me? What can I do as an employee or as an employer to make it matter to me or to the person next to me? One of the things that I've really tried to help focus on is the fact that we need to help people understand how they can secure themselves. How can they start thinking more security minded in their day-to-day life? I realize that I am left to center for most people as far as what security is. I dream it, I eat it. It's one of those things where I love cybersecurity. I love talking about it, I love teaching it, but it's one of those things where I also realize, and my daughters help me tell me this. They're like, Daddy, you talk about cybersecurity like people actually care about it. I was like, I want people to care about it, but I realize that people don't care about it the way I do. And so what my goal is what can we do to look at moving forward to help protect people that we care about, whether that be your parents, your kids, or your loved ones, where it's just like, well, if they do these things that Chris is talking about, there's a chance that something bad could happen to them. Now, one of the things that we bring up here is that emotional manipulation. I talked at the beginning of this about my dog and how she got out, and obviously I was in a time of emotional distress. Now, the bad guys are playing on this idea of the elevated emotions. Now, mine was because my dog was out, but we've also seen that the bad guys are offering full jobs. They're what's called catfishing people, if you guys are familiar with that term. They're pretending to stand up an actual job. People are sending in information. They'll even do a video interview with the people. And it's like, oh, I got a new job. This is awesome. Emotional high. It's one of those things where if you think back for the days that you were in high school or in elementary school, they always talked about test anxiety. It's like, oh, well, you should get a good night's sleep and you should, do everything that you would normally do. Make sure you have a good breakfast before you go in and you take this test. Why? Because when you're tired, when you're emotional, you make bad decisions, right? And so that's really what they're preying on, is this idea of, how can I make this person make a bad decision? We're getting all of these trainings. Almost everybody these days have gone through these phishing trainings where it comes through your email and you're like, oh, I'm thinking that might be a phishing training. Or you get those ones where it's like, hey, send me $500 and I will send you all of my money from the inheritance. I just need you to go through and click this link. Whatever it happens to be, we have this idea of like, oh, well, I'm going to do okay if the bad guy is actually coming at me in real time. But the problem is that they've gone through and they've changed their techniques to ways that you would think, well, that's mean. How could they do something like that? Why would a normal person do that? And the thought process needs to change because they're not thinking like a normal person. They're not thinking like you or I. They're thinking in a way of, how can I manipulate this person to get them to give me money or get them to give me information that then I can get money? Or maybe they're not even going after you personally. They want to get to the person that you're connected to because they've gone on your LinkedIn, they've gone on your social medias, and they found, hey, Bob over here is connected to the CEO who I really want to get through. And if I can get a hold of Bob and I can get onto his computer, maybe I can use that to get across the network and get into Bob. Or I can pretend to be Joe, and now as Joe, I can get onto Bob's computer because Joe and Bob are connected. And so we're going through that way. So what can we do as far as making sure that these sort of things aren't as effective for us. And that's really what we want to focus on, is the idea of training versus instruction. So I have a background in education. That's where I started out my career. I decided, when I was teaching eighth graders, I was like, you know what? I don't really think eighth grade is right for me. One of the things that I really loved about teaching eighth grade is that eighth graders are brutally honest. They will tell you right away if something looks weird, doesn't make sense, whatever it happens to be. But if you ever have a question about how you're looking one day and you go to an eighth grader, they'll be very honest with you. Like, Mr. Chris, that shirt looks just ridiculous. I'm not saying that happened to me, but it happened to me. One of those things that we need to focus on then, as we're looking at the difference between training and instruction, especially as we're talking about our employees, is the idea that if we're just going with training, you think about training as like, if you have ever had a dog, you're doing like the clicker training. It's that repetition. Oh, if we do this, it's going to be exactly this method. I want you to sit, so you're going to sit. What we need to do then is move it to an idea of this idea where we are helping our employees, we're helping our loved ones understand to think critically, to think security minded, to think, oh, well, this doesn't seem quite right. I should probably ask more questions, especially when we start talking about people that make money off of dealing with customers. It's like, oh, well, of course I'm going to open this link because they want to buy a house, or they want to get a loan, or they want to go out and they want to buy something for me that's going to increase my pay and it's going to be great. Everything's going to be better because I'm having an off month. Whatever it happens to be, they're looking at it of this mindset of, well, I'm going to do this because it makes sense. They've been trained that get an email, open that email, make a sell. It's moving that from this idea of, oh, well, this kind of came out of the blue. I wasn't really expecting this. Or all of a sudden, somebody that I haven't communicated with is now reaching out to me with, hey, can you look at this for me? It's making sure that when we look at how things are being communicated to us or to our employees, that we have this idea of pause for a second. Let's assess the situation. Let's look at it. Does this even make sense? Now, in that emotional high of, all right, things are going to be great here, I'm just going to follow up with this individual. You start thinking about it, you react, right? We don't want the reaction. We want them to have this idea of analyzing things, which honestly, it takes time. It takes a lot of work. And it takes, for a lot of people, it takes them actually being victimized for them to realize, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't have clicked on that link that was forwarded to me from somebody. Now, one of the things that we really need to understand is what how are they even doing that? What can be found online? What can I tell my mom that she needs to do better because she's making herself available for these bad guys to get to it? And that's when we start really thinking about what's called our digital footprint. Now, what is a digital footprint? If you look out and you Google yourself, if you've never had the fun of Googling yourself, go ahead and put your name in quotation marks and put it on Google and see if you come up. If I do that for myself, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, I have one of the most common names on the planet. And so if I Google myself, I'm not even the most famous Chris Williams in cybersecurity. You're going to find about 4 or 5 other Chris Williams. What that means, though, is that my credit gets pulled all the time because I have a really common name. Now, if you have an uncommon name, go ahead and Google yourself, and you're going to do what I do, which is called open source intelligence gathering. Whenever we're engaged with a company to do any kind of social engineering, I'm going to go through the list of employees that I can find and find somebody with a unique name. And if I can find that, then I can start figuring out, well, who are they connected to? What kind of work do they do? If I'm involved in a bank, I'm going to call the bank and pretend to be them. Almost always, I can find your phone number online. I can find out where you live. I can find your Facebook account. I can find your LinkedIn account. And there's different things that people are going to ask to validate who I am. Well, unfortunately, if for most companies, one of the things that they ask is your mother's maiden name. For those of you that don't think that's a hard one to find, try to find your mother's maiden name in correlation to who you are. It's one of those things where, who knows, maybe you have a sister that posts their maiden name on it because you're connected to them on Facebook. It's one of those things where we are able to find that very easily and a time that's allotted to us as pen testers. Now, for the bad guys, they don't really have a time allotment. They're not signing a statement of work saying, hey, we're only going to work on this for 8 hours due to our contract or whatever it happens to be. But they have an unlimited amount of resources that they can start doing research, moving, finding different things, building out these portfolios of who you are, what you do, what do you like, where do you go, where do you bank, where do you shop, what car do you own, how can I get you to click on something? And really trying to figure out what can we do to erase some of that, what can we do to alleviate some of that. So as we move on here, what can we do to help the people that we care about, the people that we take care of, whatever it happens to be? How can we help them understand why this is a big deal? I'm hoping that as you guys are listening to me, there's a little bit of anxiety as you're thinking about, oh, well, my dad really posts a lot on Facebook about where he vacations, and I should probably talk to him about making sure that things are better. What can we do to help teach people that they need to do just a little bit better? I understand that nobody's going to leave this webinar and be like, oh, well, I want to start a career in cybersecurity and learn all of these things because Chris was awesome at that. It's like that's an unrealistic goal. I mean, if you want to, I'd be more than happy to walk you through it. But the reality is that most of us are going to come away and say, oh, I have this little bit of tension in me. And so what can we do to help train those people to understand what they can do to be better? And so one of the things that I really want you to take away from this is going online. When I say Google yourself, go and do all of your different social medias. Figure out what are they set at. Honestly, if you're not looking for a job, if you're not in sales, it's one of those things where if you have a LinkedIn account, you should lock that thing down. I shouldn't be able to see who all you're connected to. If you have a Facebook, it should be set to private. Make sure that whoever you're connected to, you actually know. People create Facebook accounts all the time just to get information. And so if you get a Facebook request from somebody that has 3 or 8 connections and you don't know them, more than likely they're just trying to get some information off of your Facebook or your LinkedIn account. If you have that Facebook account and you're trying to figure out who's who, what we've done before in the past on some of our social engineering engagements is actually stand up Facebook accounts for people that don't have them. So if we look on your LinkedIn page and you see, oh, well, I'm connected to this person at my job, we'll go and see if they have a Facebook account. If they don't, we're going to steal their picture from the JPEG on their LinkedIn account, create a Facebook account, and try to friend you to see if we can't get more information that way. So it's all of these different things. And the only reason why we do that is because the bad guys are doing it. We try to pretend to be the bad guys. Now, the bad guys are going to go a step further than we are. They're willing to do things that we're not. I am not in a social engineering engagement going to emotionally manipulate you. I'm not going to say, hey, I have your dog, go ahead and send me your code, or go ahead and click this link so I can verify who you are, anything like that. But if we can go through and we can talk to the people we care about and say, hey, you should really set all this to private. One of the things that drives me nuts when we're doing things like a Venmo account or things like that is almost always, and if you guys have a Venmo account, go and look at it. If you haven't gone through and set it for private when you're sending money, everybody that's connected to you on your contact list can see what you've been paying money to, who you're talking with, who all is out there. So if their Venmo account gets hacked, then now they have a whole list of what's going on in those transactions. And so making sure that you can see how much information the bad guys can actually gather from you. One of the things that I always want to focus on too is as we're going back to that idea of, well, I just want to provide good customer service, is are we doing what we need to do to verify that we are providing customer service to our customers? On the flip side, from just communication through work channels, are we verifying that we're actually talking to the people we think we are? We get an email from the CFO or the CEO asking for something and they're like, hey, I need this data right away. There's a sense of like, we need this, but it comes kind of out of the blue. If you've had a conversation and you know something is due and it's like, hey, I need you to send this over, Chris. You were supposed to get me on this on Monday. Go ahead and send that over. I knew that this was due on Monday and it's Wednesday. I probably should send that over. But if we get something and it's like, oh, well, I need to get this right now. You haven't talked to the person at all. Don't email them back and say, hey, is this you? Are you real? Go ahead and give them a call. Go outside of the normal communications that you have. So if you have a desk phone, pick up the desk phone. If you use Teams, go ahead and message on Teams, but use something other than email. Because if they're in their email, then they're just going to reply back to you. Yeah, that was me. Go ahead and click on that. Send me that information. Verify. Make sure that you're doing steps to see who's who. Um, One of the things that we've also seen is that bad guys have, through the use of chat GPT and different technology tools that are out there, they can emulate the voices. So if you have somebody that does a lot of public speaking like myself, or does, state of the business addresses that are put on YouTube or anything like that, we can do deep fakes on faces, we can emulate those voices, we can make phone calls, and we can actually clone their phone number. So if we can see, on their websites, like, oh, well, if you want to get a hold of this person, dial 867-5309, and we're gonna put that in our computer, and we can send that out because we have that, and we can pretend to be whoever we need to be. And so making sure that, oh, well, asking questions, how'd the surgery go? How'd your kid's soccer game? Da 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 da. Making sure that, in the conversation you can verify, oh, this is actually who I'm talking to. And finally, making sure that you never open anything that you didn't request. This is coming straight from the FBI. It's one of their recommendations for anything in general. And when I say never open anything, I'm talking about text messages, I'm talking about packages, talking about emails. It's one of those things where if you didn't ask for somebody to send you anything, a package, a text message with a link, whatever it happens to be, do not open it. Do not click on it until you verified. It's like, oh yeah, I call, Susan over in accounting and say, hey, did you send me this? And she's like, oh yeah, it's your anniversary gift for being here for a year, whatever it happens to be. If it's legitimate, then it's like, oh cool, I'll go ahead and open it. But never just open it and say, oh, somebody sent me something. Somebody has a potential sell for me. It's like, I need to get this data. Oh, well, I'm going to click on it. Don't do that. Talk to your friends, talk to your loved ones, make sure that they understand that shouldn't happen, that can't happen, because that's when the bad things get into your systems. Um, it causes a whole other series of problems. So making sure that they understand that the risks of opening those things. The other thing that we really want to make sure that we're looking at here as we move forward is this idea of what's called microlearning. For those of you that aren't familiar with that, is this idea of we're going to do a lot of short trainings. What we've gotten into the habit of, and I think it happened even more over COVID as webinars and things like that became more available, is we have these long drawn out training sessions, or we're only doing it once a year. I know that, for different organizations that I've worked in over the years, everybody's trying to figure out how can we do this effectively, right? And so we started out with, oh, well, we're going to make sure that as they onboard, they sign the acceptable use policy, and then they get a cybersecurity training. And if we were ever audited, we can check that box that says, oh yeah, we provide cybersecurity training to our employees. We're good. What we're finding in the industry, and what has been shown through education for years now, is this idea of, well, people aren't retaining that information if we're only doing it in these once a time, once a year, long drawn out trainings. Like I've talked about, the reality is that more than likely when you guys leave this webinar, there's going to be maybe one or two things that you may focus on. I'm hoping that there's more, but retention is saying that you're not going to be able to hold on to all of this information for as long as I would like you to, just because of the way that this is delivered. Now, that's not to say that there's no value in this, but as you look at the idea of trying to help train your individuals and moving from training to instructing and helping them understand how to think critically, how to think securely, what can we do? Well, let's break it up. Let's do 5-minute trainings. Let's do 5-minute instructions. Let's do 5-minute lessons, whatever you want to call them. What the goal is to start making them think, oh, I'm not going to hover over the hyperlink, which is one of the recommendations we used to give all the time with the phishing email. Hover over the hyperlink, see where it's sent. The reality is nobody's ever doing that. IT people do it, security people do it. Somebody that's like, oh, well, I've been hacked or this is really important to me are going to do it. But I think most people aren't going to hover over a hyperlink to see, oh, is this Microsoft.com email actually coming from Microsoft.com? Oh, no, it's not. They're not doing that. So what can we do to make sure that they are actually paying attention? Once again, we need to bring it back to why is it important to them? Do little short trainings on what can we do to make things better? What can we do to help our people understand it? What can I do to help myself understand it? And realize, once again, going back into education, that everybody has different learning styles, right? Some people are visual learners, some people are auditory, and it's one of those things where you have to be able to do it, right? You can get that tactile learning, all of those things. You can bring in different people like myself. You can hire another security individual, stand up different things, go through different ways to make this exciting. I realize that cybersecurity can be dry sometimes, and I apologize for myself if I'm dry here, or any of my cohorts that have ever come across and saying, hey, all we need to do is stand up MFA, we need to do zero trust, we need to do this tool, this tool, this tool. The reality is none of those things matter if they can get in through the human element. If we allow our employees, our loved ones to be that weak link, to allow the bad guys to get through that one gap and have, a 0.1% batting average, that's all it takes. And then we're starting to look at, well, how did they get in? How did this happen? Why did this happen to us? And so one of the things that we really, really want to focus on is this idea of how can we practice? This is a quote from Bruce Lee. I was looking for one from Peyton Manning. I think it was something along this 10,000 repetition idea. It's like, how many times does it take to be an expert? The reality is you guys don't need to be an expert in cybersecurity. I don't need you to come and do what I do. I don't need you to go and help your security teams. What we need is for people around us to just care a little bit about making sure that they're safe online, that their loved ones are safe online. If you have kids, that you're teaching them what they can do to be safe online. T-Mobile a few months ago created this ad campaign, and if you're curious, if you're a parent, it's one of those things where it's another one of those ones that will tug at your emotional heartstrings. They're very emotionally manipulative about it, but the reality is that they posted this idea of a parent that were posting pictures of their kids online, and they used generative AI, to create what their kid would look like at 20 years old. And they had all of these different things that said, all right, well, the daughter was talking to the parents, like, these are the things that happened because my image was online. And I'm not going to go into too much detail, because it is, like I said, it's super emotionally manipulative, but it stood out to me as a parent. I've never posted my kids' pictures online, and I try to get with my in-laws and my parents and say, hey, do not post pictures of my kids. It's one of those things where we need to look back at our digital footprint once again. We need to look back at how are we going to affect not only ourselves, but the people that we're bringing up into this world, people we care about, the people that are leaving this world. What is it that we're doing to help make sure that individually we are as secure as possible? As soon as we patch that gap, we're going to be the little boy with his finger in the dike, where it's just kind of like there's going to be another leak. But right now, there's so many leaks that we're just letting through because we're not addressing it. And so what can we do as we're moving forward to make sure that everything that we're doing is helping protect the people that we care about? Once again, nobody realistically is going to say, oh, well, I can either make this sale, or I can think about security if I open this link, and I'm behind the eight ball on a lot of different projects. Somebody sent me this. I'm just going to click on that link. What we really need to make sure that we're doing is having that mentality of, what can I do to help? What can I do to help teach my mom? What can I do to help teach my dad? What can I do to help teach my kids? What can I do to help teach my spouse? Whoever it is, it's being that voice of reason within the people that we care about. And once we have that, when our employees come back to work and they get that email, they'll already have that mindset of, oh, well, this seems a little off. Maybe I shouldn't do it this way, because we've gone through the 10,000 reps. in our personal life. We haven't done it at work because the reality is that everybody that is out there that's not in my field, it's not your primary concern, right? You're there to make the business move, and you're there to honestly to try to help make yourself money, make the organization money, and doesn't always include what I do. And so as we're doing the practice, as we're doing this understanding of moving forward, what can we then do to make sure that we are as secure as possible, the people we care about are as secure as possible? And what it takes is that idea of moving things away from we're going to do it once and we're going to be okay. Because if you think about anything you've ever done in life, for most of us, unless you're like a natural at it, it's always going to take more than one time. And so thinking about that moving forward, how can we be better at it? For those of you that are concerned still about my dog did make it home. She ended up walking about a city block to a garden center, and somebody was able to scan her and get a hold of us. And so we did get her back. She's still alive and kicking. She is now fully blind, which is fun, and fully deaf. At the time, she was just partially. So it wasn't like we could run around and start calling her name. But she did come back. We do have her. And I'm able to use the story for cybersecurity training and awareness now. It was an awful time, but it was one of those things where it made me a better person for understanding what these emotional manipulation tools are going to be. I do have a lot of time left for questions, and I apologize for people if this was a little too short. Does anybody have any questions? I'm looking at the chat here. All right. I do have one that's come across. The question is what can I do to remove my digital footprint? So for those of you that took the time to Google yourself, or as you're looking out and you're trying to figure out, man, Chris, you gave me a lot of things that now I'm worried about. What can I do? It's like I see myself on Google, I see myself on LinkedIn, I see myself on Facebook, whatever it happens to be. What can I do to make sure that I'm removing myself? Now, as you go and say, if you were also to Google that, it's like, how can I remove my digital footprint? You're going to find different services that will say, oh, well, you sign up for here, we'll charge you this amount of money and we'll help wipe your digital footprint, whatever it happens to be. The reality is that you can go through a lot of your privacy settings and you can ask to be forgotten. You can ask to be removed. If you're not using certain accounts, make sure that you're shutting them down. Um, for those of you, we were talking about MySpace in the office the other day. And for those of you that remember that, it's like, oh, well, I actually still have a MySpace account. Maybe I should shut that down. It's like I haven't logged in forever. Then you can send a lot of these companies emails requesting for them to delete your information. Thanks to a lot of the different regulations that have come out, most states have either a privacy law in place or that are coming in place with this idea of the right to be forgotten. Google is actually helping you sweep your data. So if you are on the Google platform, you can go through that. You can also use different browsers outside of Google that aren't tracking you as much. I use a browser myself called DuckDuckGo. It's this idea of being able to browse somewhat anonymously so that people aren't tracking you with ads. They aren't able to intercept your search history, things like that, that put yourself at a higher risk of people being able to really target your social engineering attacks. And so being able to remove that sort of thing from online will allow you to be more protected moving forward. Another question that came over is, how should we verify our customers? I did talk about, mother's maiden name being just an awful verification code. I've also been in other locations where it's like, oh, well, we need your phone number, or we need your address, or we need 3 of the following: phone number, address, and mother's maiden name. When I'm doing social engineering tests, almost always that means they're going to fail because I can find all 3 of those very easily. And it's one of those things where it's just like, oh, well, these aren't great. It's like, oh, well, we ask them for their social security number. I don't know about you guys, but I almost never give my social security number over the phone. And so, and almost always, I've never gotten pushback from anybody when I'm doing these social engineering calls is, oh, okay, let's verify you another way. And then they start going down the script, if we have one, of saying, well, these are the ways that my organization has approved me to verify who you are. Well, let's think about some other things on moving forward on that, because honestly, those are awful. And we can find that. We can find out where you honeymooned. We can find out what your favorite sports team is. All of that sort of things we can either guess, we can find, we can research, which means the bad guys are doing the same thing. One of the only way that I think can verify is either a face-to-face in person with a driver's license or a social security number. And then if you have a unique identifier for their account numbers, things like that, they would need one of those if they're doing it over the phone as well. Just making sure that when people look at it, it's like, oh, well, you're making this very difficult for me. Everybody out there has kind of heard at one point in time of some kind of data breach, whether that be the MGM that we just had or you're a T-Mobile customer. The reality is T-Mobile's just giving out your information these days, it seems. They've been breached so many times. What can we do to make sure that what we have going forward is making sure that we're actually dealing with our real customers? Another one that we have is what kind of reward programs can we put in place to help this? With the micro training, one of the biggest things that you want to make sure that you're doing is figuring out, well, how can we gamify it? What can we do to make this better? One of the things that we recommend is, hey, get a $10 Starbucks gift card. It's like if you've correctly reported this phishing email, over the last 3 months or over the quarter, here's a $10 gift card. It's one of those things where even if you invest, $100 into your rewards program to help your employees understand the importance of this and start getting that practice and start thinking, security minded, it allows this idea of, well, I invested $1,000. Well, on average, I think if you guys saw the slide, what we're looking at is about $128,000 per incident. And so, well, people are like, oh, well, I have cyber insurance, but you still have your deductible. And so it's one of that idea that prevention is cheaper than the cure. What can we do to help prevent our organization, our loved ones from getting to the point of, oh, well, now we have a bigger problem. Do I have any another question that just came in, do I have any additional tips for how to have these conversations with employees? Well, for me, and you guys may think that this is a sales pitch, having somebody like myself come in and talk to your employees, do some micro trainings, do things like that is a great way to do it. It's like, hey, here's a security expert that knows what they're talking about. But after that, let's start figuring out, well, what can I do day to day? It's like, oh, well, our employee clicked on this link. It's like, hey, saw that you clicked on this link. What can we do? What kind of information are we looking at? What is our initial reaction? I know for a lot of old school people, we have this idea of the carrot and the stick, and we immediately go to the stick. It's like, oh, well, this person needs to be written up. This needs to go in the corrective action plan. This needs to, whatever, they need to have more training done. We need to go back to the carrot. We need to have that idea of what can we do to help progress our culture to more of a security culture. If we are immediately going to the stick method, it's been shown that it doesn't work. We've tried the stick method forever now. It's that idea of, well, you failed your phishing simulation, now you have to do a training. It's like, no. It's like, if you failed your phishing simulation, let's look at the stats that we have. How many of our employees are failing the phishing simulation? If we're over, 50%, it means something's wrong with our training. So what can we do? How can we have those conversations? Well, let's just start talking about it. Look, what can we do as prevention? The reaction isn't going to be great because already if somebody's clicked on something, they've caused that issue within the organization, their defenses are going to be up. They're going to feel a sense of shame, feel, my mother-in-law clicked on one a while back and she called me. She's like, I feel so stupid. And harping on that, bringing that up, isn't going to help. It's like, so what can we do to move forward? What can we do to do better next time? What can we do to be problem solvers, not problem bringers? Another question I have is, do I have any best practices for how to scale this across many different branches and across the country? So it's that idea of really just focusing on talking to the people that report to you, talking to the people that you care about, and helping them understand, hey, what can we do to help protect whoever, our loved ones, our spouses? Bring it home. Bring it to what about me? Why does this matter to me? Because if it doesn't matter to them individually, it's not going to matter at work. And so as we're looking at this, how can we make this an org-wide change? It really boils down to pulling aside the people that you work with day to day and say, hey, this should be important to you because it should be important to, and hopefully your coworkers, people that are important to them, right? You've developed those relationships. If not, take them out to lunch. Talk about it's like, hey, I heard this interesting webinar today. It talked about making sure that we're keeping our loved ones safe online, helping them clean up their online things. Like, hey, my mom does this, and I need to talk about. I need to help her learn. Have you done anything that has helped create a better awareness within your parents or whatever it happens to be? How can we start figuring out why does this matter to me? Because if it doesn't matter to me, once again, it's not going to matter at work. You need it to be personal. You need it to really drive home to this idea of what can I do to increase my security knowledge and my reflexes of, going back to the training method versus the instruction. We do need to have that reflex of, oh, this seems a little off. And then being able to have that instruction, that mindset of, now what can we do? What can we do to change this? Because maybe my initial reaction wasn't thinking security wise, and I get caught, and you got that, oh, you clicked on a phishing link, now you have to do more training. What can we do that changes that? What can we do to move forward this idea that we're not going to be part of that 98% of social engineering attacks that successfully lead to the breach? We're going to be the other side. We're going to be that 2% that says, hey, everybody I know about or I care about knows how to deal with this. We have this mindset of thinking, oh, this doesn't seem quite right. Um, One of the last things that I want to make sure that we touch on for all of this is this idea of bringing the security awareness into the workplace. As we're doing a lot of our walkthroughs, we get to pretend to be bad guys all the time, and a lot of people enjoy the stories of us breaking into buildings, banks, casinos, whatever it happens to be. I was walking around with an IT director a couple months ago, and he looked at me. He's like, "Oh, well, maybe people aren't saying anything because I'm with you." I was like, "Nobody here is ever going to say anything to me." Like, I'd seen enough of the culture, I understood. And the reality is that nobody most of the time will ever say anything to me ever if I look like I know what I'm doing and I belong there. Your employees, you could bring somebody in, and if they're walking around and you don't have a culture of security and somebody's walking around with a ladder or a clipboard, are they going to stop me? Are they going to stop them? Are they going to stop a bad guy from just walking around? So creating this idea of how do I think securely? Why would this matter to me? It'd be the same as if somebody walked into your house. I'm walking in your house, or I'm walking around your house. Oh, I'm just reading the meter. I haven't gotten anything from our energy company. Why are you out in front of my house? Oh, well, we just need to check the. It's like, no, that's not okay with me. You can't be on my property without me understanding. I'm going to call the energy company. Oh, well, then I'm just going to leave. Okay, you probably shouldn't have been here in the first place. So making sure that we have that in place. Making sure I don't have any other questions before I move on to my final slide. Okay, so let's finish it up with our key takeaways here. We started out talking about policies. It's like, oh, well, we have X number of policies. We have this. Our employees should know how to not, should know not to do this. They're not enough. They're never going to be enough. It's one of those things where think about if you bought a cell phone recently, or you signed up for any sort of contract, or you bought a house. How many pages of documents do you have that aren't read? It's like, oh, just initial here. One of my favorite Jim Gaffigan jokes is when he talks about hiring a lawyer. It's like, well, the documents so many pages long. How much money do I actually have to pay for not have to read this? It's like, as long as I'm not giving a kid, it's okay. make sure that we understand that what we're putting in place, whether it be policies or even the different security controls, it's not going to be enough if the people that we work with, people that we work for, don't understand that they're getting in through the humans. They're not getting in through because of lack of policy. We need to make sure that our employees and our loved ones understand why it's important to them. Say, hey, mom, you can't post this because it's going to affect me. It's going to affect my credit. Somebody's going to steal my identity because you posted all of this information. Like, hey, dad, I can't have you. It's like, I need you to stop doing whatever. And those are hard conversations, especially to have with your parents, right? Or somebody that you love. Go to your kid, hey, do not post on TikTok, whatever it happens to be that's putting you guys at risk. And then we need to make sure that we're training constantly. And it doesn't need to be these hour-long trainings. It doesn't need to be get everybody in a boardroom. It needs to be, just short 5-minute trainings. If you go on YouTube, you can find 5-minute security training. There's different platforms that allow that. Working with Richie May here, you can get some of those trainings as well. We can help stand up things for you, but making sure that you understand that people just need to have that continuous training. That once a year training, twice a year training isn't going to be enough. Your phishing training, unfortunately, isn't going to be enough. We need to make sure that our employees, our loved ones are going through and having that security mindset and practicing building that reaction and that muscle memory and all of those other things that help them question whether or not this is legitimate and this is real moving forward. I really appreciate everybody's time. I have my contact information on here. If you need anything from Richie May, we also have the Richie May contact up here as well. I do believe our slide deck will be provided to you guys later on this month. Our team will be sending that out, I believe. If I can get confirmation from Caitlin, I think that's what we saw at the beginning.
Yes,
If
we'll
I'm
send
wrong,
that.
perfect.
Sorry, we'll send that in a couple days.
Awesome. But like I said, if you guys need anything at all, if you have any questions, anything that you're like, hey, I would like a little bit more information on this, just feel free to email me. I'm really quick on my email response as long as you don't attach, some PDFs or any attachments like that, because I'm not going to open those as we've talked about. So feel free to give me a call. That's my phone number as well, and I'd be more than happy to talk to you guys about anything. So. I once again just thank you guys for your time and for attending, and we will talk again soon.